So, okay, you've made the decision to become an academy, and you're clear of your rationale and what you expect the benefits to be. So what about the process itself? Can you just talk us through how it worked for you?
The process is an interesting one because the way it's set up supports clearly the government's decision and desire for schools to convert to academy status. And so it appears at first as though you're locked in once you make the decision to convert, because you have to formally, as a governing body, make a decision to convert to be able to apply for the grant that you get. It's £25,000 available to support your research. But of course, you've formally made that decision before any consultation has taken place. And so to a lot, that feels quite uncomfortable, because it feels like a decision has been made and then you're going to go about doing the research and then you're going to go about doing the consultation. And of course, what you want to avoid is people assuming that actually it's a done deal, because that is a common perception. But unfortunately, it is part and parcel of the way the process is set up. So once you've expressed your interest, you've put your application in to convert, and you've actually got your application for the support grant in, that is what enables you to pay for legal advice to support the research process. Having said that, in hindsight, you don't have to do that bit. You can do quite a bit of research without actually getting to the point where you're making formal decisions. But as I say, that's the way it's set up. So initially we set up an Academies working group. That was a small collection of governors and the head to make sure that the research was being done properly. And I have to stress that I know for a lot of schools that were invited to convert to academy status at the outset, because they were outstanding, a decision was made and they converted in that 1st September. Our governing body position was that we would rather look before we made a decision rather than leaping into it and then doing the research in retrospect. So we felt due diligence was a key aspect for us, that we had to be able to evidence not only to ourselves to answer all our own questions, and it's fair to say that in the governing body itself there was a complete spectrum of views, from those that were quite interested at the outset and could see some very favourable reasons why it might be a good idea to convert, to those that basically said, I'll be resigning if that's a decision that you take. And one of the ones that was at the opposite end of the spectrum was the one invited to be the Academy Working Group chair. And so he was instrumental in getting involved in completing the research diligently, thoroughly, reporting back findings to each full governing body meeting subsequently, to work through each of the options that I described at the outset, from doing nothing to the collaboration to the sort of full conversion process. And by doing that and looking at all of the financial aspects, looking at all the other implications and stakeholder views that we needed to sort of bring on board, and that included not only our own internal stakeholders, but those schools that were in our immediate local context, but also the local authority, the local town councillors, a huge variety of different community stakeholders, and engaging with those. And what we did as part of the process, first of all, was to establish very clearly, in terms of our vision, what were we looking to achieve. Once we were clear about that, to settle what we knew were some anxieties from the outset, we agreed 5 points which were our guiding principles, which basically said we would look to retain collaborative relationships with existing partners, that we would look to ensure that our staff and students' interests were protected, because again, if we're looking at collaborating formally with other schools, we had to make sure that our students were going to be looked after, that our staff were going to be looked after in a way, because of our ethos. I think as a school, we'd set out from the outset a very clear vision, a very clear way of working that was inclusive, and we wanted to make sure that nothing was done by proposing changes or considering changes even that were perceived by some to be quite controversial. So the Academy Working Group then worked through each of the different stages, took on legal advice to make sure that in terms of understanding some of the model options and what was available to us, looking at the costs and being clear what they were. And one of the things that I would say was that if you've obviously got local support staff, local government pension schemes, you do need to get a quotation as early as possible, because again, that could be quite considerable. In the end for us it was less than we anticipated and budgeted for, so that worked in our favour. But we have a young staff, so again, those schools that have got an older, more established, more mature staff body might need to think about that differently in terms of employer contributions. So we initiated some stakeholder events, engagement events, and what that entailed was a presentation to talk about, some of the pros, some of the cons, where we were in terms of progressing the process to date, and inviting stakeholders to put forward their questions, concerns to us.
Who are the stakeholders? Parents, obviously.
Parents, students.
Right.
So we had different events for different target audiences, and invited community engagement as to to be included as part of those events. And at the end of the presentation, we had small groups breaking out to have a discussion around some of their own concerns and putting forward questions. We could answer some there and then, others we took away, and what we did as a result was to develop some FAQ, some frequently asked question documents, with the answers provided in detail to show that we weren't going to sweep any of their concerns under the table, that we were very serious in taking them into account. And therefore, by the time you get to the latter stages of the process and you're thinking about consulting, most of the questions have been answered in full, as I say, and I think that was really important in terms of securing support, because we worked through this process together, if you like, kept people updated via releases on the website, through newsletter updates, any other scheduled school event. We always gave an update at the outset, so even parents' evenings, we included an update to make sure that current levels of progress were being communicated. And as all change, communication is key.
Yeah, which is fine if you've taken the decision yourself as a governing body. As we know, there are a number of schools in the country that are being compelled to become academies, where that sort of consultation really is, let's say, difficult to achieve, but also seems a bit pointless because the decision's already been made by somebody else that the school is going to become an academy, whether it likes it or not. I'm not looking to you for a comment or answer to that, but clearly, what you've described seems to me to be a very mature and considerate and sensible approach. But that is not necessarily what every other school has done or is able to do in future.
And I do understand that. I mean, subsequent to our conversion, we did gain approval to become an academy sponsor.
Right.
And that was because, again, one of our aspirations at the outset was to ensure that collaborative ways of working, school-to-school support was very much a feature of what we were looking to achieve. And so in the process of sponsoring a school that's in special measures, that consultation process is a legal requirement, so therefore it has to happen. But again, I think it's important to demonstrate, even though in real terms the options were limited, because they were in special measures, they were being directed by the Department for Education to become an academy, there is still choice available. For them, it was either go with a local academy, multi-academy trust or chain, or it was for perhaps a larger regional chain or a multinational. And therefore, in terms of that process, whilst the conversion aspect was not really open to decision, it was about the way. There was still a range of possibilities that could be consulted on legitimately to ensure that the way forward did have the buy-in of key stakeholders, so staff, parents, community, and same as we've talked about previously, to ensure that the future for that school was placed in the hands that they felt would best enable them to work in a way which fits their local context and needs. And I think when the consideration was taking place over which provider, if you like, which sponsor to go with, then that was certainly a key consideration. Who did they feel could best align to the way of working to the objectives that they were looking to achieve, even though it wasn't really open for, conversion itself was not open for discussion.